Meet Carolina Stanczyk, a specialist in the Army National Guard. She takes 27 pills every day after suffering her first heart attack while on active duty. Did you have heart issues before you joined the military?
Not a single heart issue. I could run 10 miles at a time, play basketball, and now I have trouble just standing up.
What's to blame?
I mean, the only thing that would have changed was the COVID vaccine, and that's when everything flipped upside down for me.
So is this Army memo an acknowledgement that your heart condition is the result of the COVID vaccine?
It 100% is an acknowledgement that it was a result of a vaccine.
Think about that. You were told that didn't happen. You were crazy. I don't know if you remember this. Remember COVID? Screw you. Remember the COVID, right?
Yeah, I was the problem.
So yes. And we had many people on the show who decided to leave the military because of the vaccine mandate. Now, the left will tell you there wasn't a vaccine mandate for everyone. It was just government workers, including those in the military. It's still, when you're talking about an experimental injection, that's enough. But don't forget, they did attempt. Right? They did attempt to put into place mandates for everybody. It just didn't work. Don't ask yourself what the left would do, or what the left does, I should say, with the checks and balances we have in place. Ask yourself what they would do if those didn't exist, if they had completely unfettered power. All right. You kind of see that with our three-letter agencies. You kind of see that with the Defense Department, where they were able to implement the mandates right away without the necessary science at that time. Let me give you a quick refresher. August 24th, 2021, the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin issued a memorandum mandating, right, COVID-19 vaccine for all members. There are 8,000 members of our military and armed services. Wow. They were booted for refusing to take the vaccine. 8,000 people. Also, quick note, we have a recruitment shortfall, but that's neither here nor there. Yeah. Remember, they were there, they were at that moment in time to try and protect you and anyone who didn't get the vaccines as it relates to the military or you. I want to spend some time on this really quickly. This is going to be a little bit of a longer montage, but it's important that you don't allow this to be memory hold, because now they just try and change the policy a little bit, but not acknowledge that they destroyed lives which can never recover. People have developed new lives, whether it's business owners or people who are serving their country in the military. But they had to develop their new lives from the ground up, from square one. So remember, at that moment in time, these 8,000 people, and you, if you refused to get the vaccine because there was nothing wrong with that vaccine, you were a denier, you were a conspiracy theorist, you were a villain out to kill grandma.
So there's no excuse for anyone being unvaccinated. This continues to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. So we got to make more progress.
As Dr. Walensky said on an earlier briefing today, this is really becoming a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
I actually support what the CDC is now doing, which is going back to this indoor mask requirement, because frankly, we know that we can't trust the unvaccinated.
She later had problems with her own child because of school shutdowns
for
and
any
masks.
variety of reasons, probably responsible for an additional 200,000 to 300,000 deaths in this country.
You have these anti-science people who are now not only bashing the vaccine.
Anti-science. We'll come back to that.
Also saying,
the new report.
No, you know what? We need to make sure that nobody in America knows who took the vaccine and who didn't take. Wrong. Wrong. Hey, you know what? You missed
chicken butt.
The stop. The train left the station. Your idiocy.
You see the Twain?
You and the last president together helped kill hundreds of thousands of Americans.
What, did we?
That stop was it left on January the 20th, and you're just standing there by yourself. And look around at the idiots who are around you.
I don't know, idiots. Stops don't leave.
Yeah, what?
The train leaves. The train leaves the stop.
Also,
dummy.
I'm in my car.
Yeah.
Using public transportation, you fool.
We have the right to know what everyone has put. Hey, my body is my choice, but we want to know if you put an experimental injection into your body that we are claiming has no side effects, even though the science hasn't been conducted. Screw that guy with a wire brush. Yeah. As more side effects become apparent, more people now are sounding the alarm. What does it take? How much worse?
Was that the alarm or the side effects?
Both.
He was like that before. Pre-existing conditions.
Pre-existing conditions. So now, remember, I just set the stage there. Now we have a breaking report by this investigative journalist, Catherine Herridge, all but confirmed that the U.S. government knows the mRNA vaccine can be deadly. The report is live on her X page. You can follow her C_Herridge. Sorry, 2 underscores, I believe there is. I'm looking here. I always have their names. 2 underscores. Let's work on that.
Yeah.
There's someone else hanging on to 1_Herridge.
So who is this?
Don't be a jerk.
Let me give you the very specific case. And the military has now, I'll foreshadow here, has now admitted that this obviously did take place because of the vaccine that was forced. And of course, we've seen metadata that obviously tells us that there are side effects. There are many lawsuits taking place with the federal government. It doesn't mean that everybody who gets the vaccine has horrible side effects. It doesn't mean that every conspiracy theory you read out there is true. It does mean that when you were told you couldn't transmit the virus if you had the vaccine, that wasn't true. When you were told that you wouldn't get sick if you got the vaccine, that was true. And when you were told that there were no serious side effects, that was untrue, as seen by other countries actually barring particularly young men under the age of 20 from taking the vaccine, and certainly in children. Remember, they wanted this vaccine, come one, come all, everybody, and certainly everyone in our armed services. Well, let's look to Carolina Stancic. This person, and this video actually, I believe, is live now, but it was sent to us this weekend, ended up suffering from debilitating heart issues caused directly by the Moderna mRNA injection.
Meet Carolina Stancic, a specialist in the Army National Guard. She takes 27 pills every day after suffering her first heart attack while on active duty.
Did you have heart issues before you joined the military?
Not a single heart issue. I could run 10 miles at a time, play basketball, and now I have trouble just standing up.
What's to blame?
I mean, the only thing that would have changed was the COVID vaccine, and that's when everything flipped upside down for me.
So is this Army memo an acknowledgement that your heart condition is the result of the COVID vaccine?
It 100% is an acknowledgement that it was a result of a vaccine.
Good thing I have that memo. Here's the memo. The memo of their MO issued by the Department of the Army. It says, research has confirmed a link between a COVID-19 infection and POTS, or postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, that has been diagnosed in some patients. POTS was also linked to a lesser degree to COVID-19 vaccination with an mRNA vaccine. Here's something pretty interesting. Stancic never tested positive for COVID. Only the vaccine. Got the vaccine, didn't have COVID.
So they just basically said, hey, COVID can do it. And to a lesser degree, they kind of minimized it. To a lesser degree, the vaccine. And she's like, well, never had COVID.
Yes.
It kind of narrows it down.
Yes. Think about that for a second. Think about that. You were told that didn't happen. You were crazy. Now, we don't know how many more people to whom this has happened, because they fight it until they're caught red-handed, and we'll get to that in a second. There have been more than 13,000 injury claims that have been filed with the federal government. Okay, there have been nearly 1 million reports to the VAERS system over the COVID vaccine, which they will now say, well, that's just that was the system that was always used for vaccine side effects before COVID, just to be clear. It was the gold standard. They want to tell you now that it's not.
And guys, give me the number on this. The last time we talked about VAERS, I think they said that only 1 out of 100 are reported to VAERS. So if that number, that's 100 million.
Yep.
If that's true. Guys, confirm that if I remember correctly.
That could be a general estimate. It's at least 1 million. It's at least 10 times more than any other vaccine, mainly because this is not a vaccine, in modern recorded history. Now let's go to 2022. The Army, so Stancic, this story is getting out now. The problem is she doesn't get this time back. She was released from active duty, and the military, the Army, claimed that her condition had nothing to do, even though it was the vaccine that was mandated. They said, no, it has nothing to do with her time in the military, which of course left her to pay her own medical bills as the direct result of the mRNA injection.
In April 2022, Stancic was released from active duty and told us she lost her health insurance and about $3,300 in monthly income.
I would say it's a culture of silence, but also at the same time, there's a fear of retaliation from the military and the government.
Yeah, I can imagine that's the case when you have $90,000 in medical bills and she had to live out of her car because she took an injection that the military forced her to take and then said, we're not going to cover it because it has nothing to do with the military. If she wasn't in the military, would she have taken that injection? Probably like a lot of Americans, she would not have. And now she has POTS. By the way, I was tested for POTS. For those people who don't necessarily know what it is, almost think of it as like a broken actuator. Your body regulates sort of blood pressure when you get up really quickly. People with POTS often might get dizzy. It's sort of like low blood pressure. What happens is your body regulates blood pressure. Says, oh, I got to make sure that all the blood doesn't drop to your legs here when you get up. You have to make sure there's equal blood distribution across the body. Of course, this is a gross simplification. When you have POTS, that doesn't really happen. You don't really have that switch to tell you how to regulate it properly, and that causes heart problems, like we talked about. Tachycardia comes with a lot of other complications, cold hands, cold feet. Sometimes it's misdiagnosis for Raynaud's syndrome. So it can be something that's very serious. I was tested for it at one period in time, and that's how I know about it. And it does seem as though it's something pretty damn common to happen with these injections. It's induced by them. So now we have actually Jeremy Sorensen, a service member advocate. He made it pretty clear that Stanczyk's vaccine, and we now see it from the military, to be clear, it was obviously suffered in the line of duty.
Wait a second, because I want to understand something. So you've got a 24-year-old who followed orders, got the COVID vaccine, believes she's COVID vaccine injured, and that's not in the line of duty?
Well, by law, it's in the line of duty. But the Army and the National Guard abandoned Carolina Stanczyk for 19 months.
So they didn't admit it until 19 months after the injury. And then, here's a memo, after a thorough review of the medical documents, SPC Stanczyk's POTS is considered in line of duty by the preponderance of evidence. SPC Stanczyk was released from active duty without having a line of duty completed or having her medical condition stabilized. So, for serving her country, and by the way, she's a woman, so they should have been extra thrilled about that, debilitating heart condition, $100,000 in medical bills, unceremoniously released saying, nah, this has nothing to do with the military, and she had to fight and claw her way back for the justice that she deserved. How many people have experienced this across the country? How many of those VAERS reports? How many of these complaints filed with the federal government? And you still have people claiming that you are the bad guy. It's cooled a little bit because you have many, many people who got the vaccine who, at what point does anecdotal become empirical? Because everyone knows someone who was vaccinated, who got the mRNA injection, who has experienced some side effects. I'm pretty sure you know one. I know one. Yeah. I don't know about Toolman. I don't know if Josh does. I know several. I know people who I would love to have on this show because of where they lined up, because of their line of work. And the side effects were so severe, but they can't because they'll be fired. Yeah. I know these people right now. I'm thinking of two people in my mind who I wish would come on the show, but of course I would never out them because it actually is their private medical decision. So it's cooled a little bit, but we still have the DNC parroting this point. You still have Trudeau parroting this point. And you know what? I will say this guy, Mr. Sorensen, summed it up as effectively as I think anyone could, so there's no need for me to do it.
I can't explain how any military officer could mistreat our service members like has happened to Specialist Stanczyk. It hurts me deeply because it takes away my faith in our own Defense Department, our own government, which I swore to serve. And I would willingly do that again. But I'll tell you what, I wouldn't recommend anybody else do it.
That's a very hard thing to say. I know that. That's all right. Yeah, just take a minute.
Think about that for a second. The crisis of conscience that people have been thrust into against their will. Not just the people to take the mRNA injection. And by the way, I've known people who actually have neurological conditions where they would be exempt from all of the vaccines. These people who are not vaccine deniers, who have seizure disorders and conditions where they're not supposed to take a flu shot, they could not be exempt from the COVID vaccine in their line of work. This goes to show you this dynamic. You can support your military, support your troops, support the people out there who are fighting for this country, because there's a huge divide between those people out there with guns, and that includes a lot of commanding officers, and the people with pencils, the people determining the policy. Whether it's DEI recruiting or COVID mandates, they share nothing in common with most of the people who actually want to serve the America as it was, not the America that the people with pencils in Washington, D.C. demand it become. Does that make sense? Are you able to make that delineation? I don't want this to veer into anti-military sentiment, because we know so many people in our military who, we don't like to say this because they're obviously brave people. That term is misused. They're actually brave, putting their life on the line for this country. But they are the victims of the policy of people with pencils.
Absolutely. They were betrayed.
Yes.
Like, that's what you saw in that. That guy was a fighter pilot. That's not some DEI pencil pusher in the administration just kind of sitting there going through his career. That's a badass guy who's saying, my government betrayed us.
Yep.
Our military, the people that are supposed to have their backs, betrayed them. And it's not just them. Like, that's one of the hardest things to take, I think, for service members, is that they were betrayed. They're supposed to have complete trust because they have to go out and follow orders that could get them killed any day. And it was the medical community that did it too. It wasn't just the military. This was widespread, people that knew better and should have had our backs, and they did a terrible job. So I'm really glad she did that reporting, and I'm glad the military finally admitted it. Now accountability needs to happen. Watch Louder with Crowder live Monday through Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern.